All right. So I'm getting this sketch done. Hopefully, we were hoping we were broadcasting while I was getting the sketch done, but apparently we were having technical difficulties. The age of computers, ain't it wonderful? Again, this is a photo that I shot, brought a model up to the Mount Baldy area of LA, and we had him pose as a prospector. And there's actually he's got his little gold pan right up here, so if I can get that in there, I will at the very end. Right now, really what I want to do is just to get these shapes in. I said, as I was sketching this up, when you're drawing figures, you have to be a little bit more accurate. When you're drawing trees, rocks, things of that nature, you do not have to be as accurate. But because there's anatomy and everything involved. So you get it in there, and then what I like to do initially is lay in shapes. Go from line to shape, because then I can see if I'm right or wrong. So a lot of times I'll just take the same color. So this is a little brown and a little blue mixed in with it, so it's kind of neutral. And we'll just kind of block in some shapes and see how I'm looking. The hat, normally I would get the background in, which I will do. I won't finish him off until we get a little bit more into the background. But I just want to see if my drawing's okay. And I can't tell. That looks to be about right for the hat. Now, with a lot more terp, I am going to block in that shadow. That's a little more terp than I wanted. This shadow. And in doing so, hopefully I can see if I've got my proportions about right. I think I've got the beard a little long. He's got a shadow down in here. So you can begin to see sometimes, all of a sudden, when you convert it from line to mass, you can double check your drawing, your proportions, everything. All this is in shadow. Now I've got a little more terp in it than I want, so I'll just kind of dry it off on a paper towel and just kind of scrub. I generally, when I sketch these in like this, I actually do a lot of scrubbing. Pants are pretty dark, so I'm not going to mess around with trying to show light on the pants. We're just going to look at the shape, because the light that is on the pants is not really super contrasty. And as I mentioned, I know the light is coming from above, almost directly above, and over to the right. I can see that. So very quickly, just by blocking in the darks, I can see if I've got my proportions worked out. Again, working in just line, it is, I've found, sometimes I don't even draw with lines. Sometimes I just start massing in shapes, because that's how I see things. I see things as shapes. And that's, we don't see line. Keep that in mind always. That's probably a point worth mentioning a little bit more. We don't see line. We see shape. Line is a graphic tool that we have devised to show the edges of shapes. So I'm going to kind of block this in. A little bit too dry. When it gets that dry, you know what, I'm going to switch over to my gesso brush, because I think I can get it working a little bit quicker with that. It's just because it's a bigger brush. So yeah, you see that? I can get it moving a little bit faster. So we're going to get the side of that in. There's a cast shadow below it. Comes over near the pick. Down, cast shadow. There's a few divots in the rock. I don't worry about where they are. Cast shadow from his hand. And I did not draw his hand in. I think I should. There is, I'm going to draw it in with shapes, shadows. Shadow. Shadow for the that finger, and the little finger up here. So we got the shadow kind of the hand in. Some of the wrinkles. More of a shadow. I'm going to add a little bit more blue to it, but a little bit more of a shadow over here. Down here. Bottom of the cuff. Little shadow on this side. Shadow behind him. So we're unifying. I'm going to make the shadow a little bit longer on this side. But we're unifying shadows. It's another tool you can use, unification. You unify the shadows, and it helps you, it helps with the design of the piece. So this goes here, I've got a shadow under here, back here, up here, a little bit on this side of this rock. I changed this rock. I brought it up here, and I'm not going to do that dark spot in there. We're going to take this up above his, I don't like that. We're going to make it more like that. Okay, here, there's another little rock here, a little thing on the back side, gold pan up here. And we've kind of got in basically enough to start painting. So I've got my design worked out. This line is going to come here. I like it breaking down a little bit more and over and then back up. So we're going to do with that. Now let's get some of the background in so we can really concentrate on the figure. We're going to start with up here. It's very light. Sunlight is hitting it. So I'm using Naples yellow light and my palette today. I actually have some yellow laid out, which I don't know if I'm going to use because I was considering doing another image. I have Radiant White, Naples Yellow, Light, Yellow Ochre, Cadmium Orange, or Cadmium Red Light, Alizarin Crimson. I actually have a Radiant Violet and a Radiant Blue. I have no idea why I laid them out, but I did. I'm probably going to mix them in with some of the lights in the rocks. Ultramarine Blue, Sap Green, Raw Sienna, what is that? Oh, Asphaltum. And then I threw some, I don't always lay it out, but I threw some, what do you call it, some burnt sienna in. So let's get kind of this area in. Feels okay. I kind of want it to be mucked up a little bit. So we just kind of put some other colors into it as I'm painting. I'm even going to mix a little bit of a Radiant Blue into it. I don't want it to be a color, one clean, flat color. It's not. So I'm looking for the activity through literally changing the character of the paint. Up there, up here. Okay, we got that. Then we got the ground plane right down in here. I'm going to bring some more raw sienna into it and a little richer as it comes down towards us. And that'll allow me to show the rocks off a little bit more. And then down in here, as it comes down to the shadow, a little bit behind him. And as I have said many, many times, everybody, these are approximations when you're first laying things in. You may choose to readjust as you move along. Now, I made that shadow connect with this on purpose. Down. There's like a water stain below his boot on the ground plane, and I don't want to put that in there because it's kind of deceptive. So we're going to hit all these ground planes as soon as they're in, get them in as quick as I can. I don't like the fact that it's real flat right in that one area, and I mixed in a little bit of burnt sienna, and I'm going to mix in a little bit of ultramarine blue into the same color just to get some textural variations in it, just so it isn't too flat and clean. Sometimes you can do that with a piece of paper. You don't always have to use a brush. And I'll see if I can show some of that later on. So we got most of this ground plane in. There's still more up here, and I can very quickly get kind of a tone in. That also helps define the hat shape.
I think I missed a few questions. Is Radiant White whiter?
Is Radiant White whiter? That, you know, I don't even know how to answer that. I just like it better. I like the way it mixes with other colors. And it's a clean white, I'll give you that. It is a very clean white. As to whether it's whiter or not, I've really never measured it. I just find I like it. And so that's a great, I mean, some of these questions are wonderful because it makes me want to go back and actually see if there is something to that. So we got a little bit of ground plane in. Let's get some of the rocks in so we can get into the main part, meat and potatoes. Now, this rock here, this side of this rock, oh, paint, look at this side of this rock is a little bit darker than the ground. I like that. So what I'm going to do, it's slightly warm. I'm going to use maybe a little bit of the asphaltum, a little bit of maybe the radiant blue because it's got white in it, and maybe some yellow ochre. And I'm going to start with that. That's darker than I want. So I threw some Naples yellow into that color and a little bit more ochre.
So Chuck Todd said scrubbing at this stage more for control as defining mass or just preference?
More for control, defining mass, I would say. And it is a preference. You don't want to be too definitive at this stage. You don't want to be too perfect, so to speak. You want to leave and let some of, as I've mentioned many times, let some of that energy happen. And that's one of the reasons. Okay, now it's very light. Also, as I'm mixing in there, I like to kind of get other colors in. So I just picked up on the tip of that brush a little radiant blue. And see, I'm just throwing it in there just to get the minerals in the rock. Whether I see them or not, sometimes I begin to see them, sometimes I just make them up. And some of that comes from painting rocks. If you've painted a lot of rocks, you begin to realize that you can, truthfully, you can almost do anything you want to with them and make it work. You got to keep the value right, though, you guys. You got to keep that value right. All right, now I see it kind of cool right in here. It's probably cooler than I wanted, but I'll live with it. I find I use that phrase a lot when I demonstrate. I'll live with it. In other words, put it in there. Don't worry about being so exact right in the beginning. Get the feeling correct. And the exactness, and when you're dealing with rocks or even foliage, sometimes that exactness doesn't have to be as clear as it might be on, say, a still life or a figure. You know, you deal with a figure, and you better be pretty close to right on where you want to be. You deal with a still life, and you got to be relatively correct when you're dealing with something like a coffee cup, or you can always make that coffee cup fatter and the handle a little fatter, but there's still a symmetry to it. So the accuracy in drawing tends to be a lot more necessary. Where when you get into a rock, hell, a rock can be skinny, fat, long, craggy, smooth. So you can do a lot of different variations with it. It's one of the reasons I actually love painting rocks. It's one of the things that I enjoy very much because I can get bold with it without, and I can be wrong. And you can't be wrong when you're doing a figure, but you can when you're doing a rock. Now you're probably going to talk to 2 or 3 artists that's going to say, oh no, rocks have to be, you can make a rock longer. You can make it, like I want the white part of this, the sun baking down on the top of that. See it? Look at that. I don't even care if some of this background comes through. I kind of like it. It adds texture to the rock. So I might just leave it like that. Kind of like all that junk up in there. I see some more possible variations I can do as we move down. We got another rock right here. It overlaps it. It's really bright on the edge. And then it's not quite as bright as we move towards the middle. And we get those interesting little edge qualities. Sometimes forcing yourself to do things a little quicker you use your brush a little differently. So you don't try and be as clean, and what you'll begin to find is you can come up with characteristics that are really quite interesting, quite unique, and literally add something to the painting that you might not add if you took your time and you made everything, you followed that that image verbatim. So it teaches you, and I think what teaches you that is working on location. I really believe that's how you get some of that, is by working on location. Because of the time constraint, you literally are forced to make some decisions that if you were in your studio, you could ponder over for hours, days, until you know. It's one of the blessings of working in a studio. It's also one of the downfalls because you do have that time to reevaluate, and there is a great part of that I absolutely agree with, because I love the evaluation process. But you lose some of the energy and spontaneity because you have the opportunity to be so exact. I don't have that opportunity when I'm doing these quickies. Behind the rock, I'm just looking for any sort of textural variations that I can do to improve upon or make it interesting. It's both. I mean, I'm trying to improve upon it, but I'm also trying to create interest. Let's put the top of this rock in, although there are some rocks in the background, and I can just take the dirt in my brush and just indicate fun little shapes that are strokes. Okay, clean that brush off for a second, and then let's do the top of that. Very, very white. There's some yellow, which I'm going to use. The Naples and the white right here. And we're going to put the top of that rock in, and then we're going to kind of keep it firm up above and a little softer as it moves into the form. So that feels pretty good. I don't want to dwell on any of these too long. I do want to hit the top of this rock now. It's actually a rock that's up here now that I look at it. And, oh, I like that stroke. And this rock next to it is actually lower, which means I want that background tone to come down more. I want it, and there we go, down in there. And then now I'll hit, and even though it isn't as light, I'm going to make it light. There, getting some of the textural qualities back into that rock. A little bit on this rock, so we get it to stand out. I could be coming in at the end also with a knife and getting some more interesting characteristics. Not crazy about that tone. I just think that tone is off. It bothers me. So I'm just going to take, I don't want to dwell on it and really fuss on it too long, but I'm just going to mix a little bit of a other color into it and see if we can give it a little bit more life. Okay, that to me feels better. In here it's going to be very similar. It's pretty light. It's a negative space, so I may go back and fuss on that a little later, but right now we just want to get it in there. Pick up the bottom of the shirt. Again, all this brush is allowing me to do is get this in here quicker. Because it's so long, you can carry a lot of paint in it. So it's not a refining brush. It's a brush for, you can get characteristics out of it that you can't out of other brushes. So I like to use brushes for whatever they'll do for me. If I can get something, and the truth is, you can use other elements. You can use a knife. You can use paper towel. I know artists that use almost anything. If you just kind of eventually get to the point where, as long as it works, use it. Okay, a little bit on this rock. Really light. Comes down from here. That's near white. It's got a little bit of Naples yellow into it. And then it blends down into this part of the rock here, and I'm going to bring some more ochre into that part. There we go. And we'll just kind of mix it in with that paint that's already there.
So the real wants to know, when you're painting, your thinking is dominated by the design, shape, color, value, etc. Subject is secondary, yes?
Yes. In the beginning, subject becomes more important as you get into refinement. But in the beginning, you're absolutely right. The way the whole piece is beginning to look. That's why I brought the fact of not just kind of roughing in the shapes and don't worry about the exactness. That happens as we move towards as you move towards to what you would call refinement or completion. That's when you should be worrying about all that kind of stuff. Let's get this big rock. There's some really beautiful ochre and raw sienna colors back into it. So I'm going to start with the raw sienna, and I'm going to put it right here. Look at that. See that gob of paint? I like that. Now I mix that in. I lightened it just a little bit here. And as it goes down, I've brought some burnt sienna into it because we're going to bring some more reds down into that. Beautiful minerals that cause these rocks. Be fun to go out here with a geologist that could tell you that. Talked with a couple of friends that are geologists about some of the interesting rock formations on the Sonoma coast. But this is Southern California, actually. This is up near Mount Baldy, an area called Ice Canyon. It's got a wonderful little stream that runs through it. And if you get up there at the right time of the year, it's gushing. Get interesting waterfalls. Now I've mixed some radiant blue. There's a lot of color variation in here. There's a lot of cools. I think I might even bring a little ultramarine right at this point and kind of dirty that color up a little bit so it isn't quite so red. So I started with the red. Now I'm going to start to move away from it in some of the other colors. Down here, up there. I'm going to bring ochre into it now. It's still darker than I want it, so I'm throwing some white into that along with the ochre. And let's try it again. That feels better as we move up. Now this paint is actually not real thin. If it's too bright, I add more white and more blue to kind of tone it down. And if I'm not mistaken, when you get a lot of red in the rocks, it's iron. And let's just kind of, there we go. I like that. I just mixed some Naples yellow light back into it. And I want to get this in here pretty quick. And there's some areas right about in here. I'll go back to this later, providing I have the time. If not, I'll leave it more abstracted. I want to put a little shadow in there, so I've got some asphaltum and ultramarine, which gives me a kind of a nice gray, cool gray, and I can move in the shadow from here over to here because I like it, and I want it in the painting. And while I've got that color, if I want to move it around and get another little crevice down in here, there's some darks. And as it moves, I went darker and I put more blue into it. Using the same brush, same color, so I really haven't changed a whole lot other than the fact that I just keep adding color to it. So I'm not I'm not cleaning the brush every time and coming up with a new mixture. At this point, it's not important. I don't want things to be that pure, that clean. Take a little bit more of that blue and brown together. And we'll clarify the shadow, cast shadow below it. And if I just mix a little bit of sienna or any other color into it, I should be able to get a little bit of this in shadow. So that's the rock in shadow. I kind of see it, but I don't see it as clear as I'm painting it. All right. So I'm using a little bit of artistic license. That's a phrase that, boy, did we use that when I was in school a lot. A lot of times we'd use it. If you make a mistake, you say, "Oh, that's artistic license," until it doesn't look good, and then that artistic license excuse doesn't work. Okay, let's put the lighter lights in that rock. We'll move down in here, and then we can move up into the figure. So I've spent maybe 30 minutes, if that, in doing this. Now we're going to take the white and mix it almost back into that color with a little Naples yellow, and we're going to hit the top part of this rock. There, here. Move it up into that area. If the paint doesn't stick well, I can either move turp or my safflower oil into it. I want to get a little cooler, so I mixed a little of that radiant blue. The reason that radiant blue does work in this case is we're talking about areas that are very light, and since I don't have to, I could be using ultramarine just as easily. I just happen to have that laid out on my palette. I didn't necessarily plan it, but it will work for me. Okay, a little bit more behind his hand, so I get it, because his hand is really bleached out. So we want to get some of that warm color behind it. And as it sneaks up in where the fingers are, let's at least kind of get a little bit of tone in there so I don't have to make it up later. Got a nice beautiful white streak coming down, working down into that area. A little white and blue together, and we'll kind of go back in this, mix it up a little bit, kind of up in here. Kind of just smear it into the paint down in here. Okay. And last but not least, there's a lot of ochre right there and white. And it even more, I'm going to throw a little bit of, whoa, accidentally picked up a little bit, and I don't care, cat orange. Right up here, it's darker and warmer. So I'm letting sometimes accidental colors just mix in. I am controlling it, but at the same time, if the color, I should say, if the value feels correct, I'll let a different color go in than maybe I see. Because the value carries it, you know. I go back to that line that's used quite often. I've heard other artists use it. Value does the work, and color gets the credit. Which I completely believe. I am a value first person. Get that value correct. Be off in the color. Do not be off on the value. Unless it's for design purposes. But when you're painting for authenticity on any subject, get that in there. So we're going to move down into the ground plane down in here. And that's a big rock. Now I want this rock to go back behind. And it's cooler. So I'm taking white, mixing it back into kind of the light rock color I had. And I'm going to mix some of that radiant blue, which is the lighter color. So it's going to be more of that, maybe a little ultramarine. A little bit more. I want the value. I don't want it too white. There, that feels better. So I want this rock to extend over here. And then back behind. And there's a cast shadow. We're going to get in there, but we're going to kind of scumble this in every now and then, pick up an additional color that kind of works its way into that rock. And once we get enough of it laid in, there is a shadow on it being cast by the pick, and it's right here, and then it goes over and it's right behind it. It's right here. So we're going to leave that kind of alone right now. I'm looking at the shadow there. I'm looking at the shadow there. I'm going to paint that shadow on the ground plane in, add a little blue to it so it's not quite as thin. So we're going to kind of come in here and just, and I don't want it as dark as the pants. And as I see it in my reference, it is as dark, but I don't want it as dark. I want those pants to stand out. So you do a little adjustment. There's some foliage back in here, which is kind of neat, which I think I can add in towards the end. And there's some little lights peeking through. And while I've got this brush, I'll just let a little light dance through here, down in here. Abstract at this point. Think, design, abstraction, anything such as that. It helps. I want to get that blue, gray-blue color right about there, and then a little bit of mixtures so it isn't quite flat. Well, I've just got some other dirt in that brush. So, and that's what I'm using. I'm using the dirt of the brush. So I got enough of that background laid up. I'll lay a little bit of what the base color of the water in, and I'm just going to use raw sienna and a little maybe green with the raw sienna. Oh, I'm not too far off. And I'm going to lay it in pretty thin. Whoops, picked up a little cad orange by accident. And I'm going to lay it in pretty thin. So I just want to get a tone in there right now. Feels about right. Could probably be a little darker. Let's get darker as it comes closer to us. Maybe even a little bit more green. I don't know. Let's try that. Yeah. And it's a little bit of a bluer green. And I'm gonna, I hate something to just be one clean flat color, whether it's a ground plane or whether it's water, anything. So you want to look for the different variations that you begin to see in it and try and depict that, you know, with some degree of accuracy, but a little bit of artistic license. Well, there's that word again. Okay, so we kind of have this laid in now, the background. And if I have to, I could leave it at that, probably refine it a little bit. But let's get into the figure. He's our star anyway. So we've taken probably 40 minutes to draw him and get the background in. Now basically what I want to do is begin to go into the figure himself. So I've got one of my great Rosemary number 8 brushes. I think that's a number 10. And it's long. It actually is a filbert. The hat is pretty good, so I'm going to leave that alone for right now. I'm not going to fuss with it. Maybe clean up an edge here or there. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay a shadow face color. I'm going to start with a cad red light or cad orange, and I'm going to gray that down. How do you gray it down? With its complement, which is blue. And then that goes too dark. So I want to add a little bit of lightness to it. I went a little too light. You still want the warmth of the flesh, but in shadow. Boy, that's not too bad. I'm going to go a little cooler, which just means I add a little blue. And we'll start with this as a shadow flesh color. Hat comes down a little lower. And gets a little darker on the side, gets a little more red. So I can add more of the either alizarin or something down deep in here. Oh, I'm going to go more red. I'm going to exaggerate a little bit, make it a little bit more fun to look at the face. There we go. And on the other side, pretty similar, pretty similar. The nose has a little bit of shadow on it, right about there. A little bit of light. Now you see the size of the brush I'm painting with. I believe that's the way to begin. And I know a lot of people work with real tiny brushes. I'm more of a big brush guy, so I believe very wholeheartedly in starting with brushes that are large and finishing as I move, and I need that clarity of refinement. The other thing is that you all have to consider is, and I've used this word before, and that's intent. You need to have what you're trying to get out of this, whether you're trying to be very bold and painterly or whether you're trying to be really refined. In both cases, I believe starting with a larger brush is the way to go. So we've got basically the shadow laid in on the face. There's almost a little hair happening there, which I kind of like. But first thing I want to do is take that background and clarify that part of the hat. Next thing we're going to do is let's get just looking here. Let's get the vest in. Let's get the shirt in. The reason I'm saying that is the shirt sits in front. The vest sits in front of the shirt. All right, and because the vest sits in front of the shirt, my preference is usually to paint what's behind first. And since the shirt is behind, and I like the blue with the warm vest, so I'm not going to change the color of that shirt. I'm going to keep it kind of bluish, but I'm not going to paint it as a pattern right now. If I'm lucky enough to have the time, I will add a pattern. So it's going to be kind of a blue-gray. So I took my ultramarine blue, white, and a little bit of the cad. Boy, that's not bad. It's a little darker than I want, but not bad. And we'll start with that arm. There. And we'll bring it down. That's the basic light on that arm, and then this part of it is pretty light. If I can, I'm going to try and show you how to do that pattern. So we're going to just start with this, and then start with over here. Again, it's ultramarine blue, white, and a little cad orange. I'm going to grab one of my other brushes here. Let's just take this one. And what I want to do is get that shadow in on that side of his. So I've got kind of a shadowy color mixed up that I was using in the rocks. It's kind of a non-color. In other words, it's not obviously, it's quite neutral. It doesn't lean heavily warm or heavily cool. And so it's giving me a lot of freedom to use that as a shadow in the shirt. And you can see how that light, now it's a very dark shadow on the shirt right here. All right, and then I can use that brush and I can pull as we go up, but I'm going to stay with this blue that I've got, and I'm going to get the rest of this arm in. I want to see if I've got the hand in the right spot. I feel like it's a little low, but we'll see. I may have to move some things. That feels pretty good. Soften that edge a little bit just by dragging that brush. Now, as long as I've got that blue, I can make it a little darker, a little bit more ultramarine, this time maybe a little bit of brown in. So it goes a little darker. And it's because it's getting more of a what we would call a raking or kind of an oblique type of light down towards his belly, which is receiving a little bit of light, but nowhere near as bright as up here. So all I did is darken it a little bit. We got to hit a little bit of the shadows. And while I've got that slightly darker version, I can add in little touches, little subtle variations that I see, like here, here. I kind of, when I'm teaching certain classes, I refer to this as activity. It's actually, there are wrinkles, folds that occur because of compression, because of tension, because of gravity. So folds can occur, different kind of folds, and they all have different characteristics. The more you paint folds, the more you start to get a feel for the different kinds of characteristics. Okay, with that dark color that I was just using in this brush, I'm going to take my blue and my brown, blue meaning ultramarine, brown meaning asphaltum, and I'm going to amplify. I'm going a little warm on me, so I'm putting more blue into that mixture. But what I'm doing is I'm amplifying this, the shadow here. More blue, still feels warm, that's why. That's behind. Now, while I've got that mixed, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to add some terp to it. Blue, a little bit more blue in it. And I'm going to take that right down into the pants. Why mix it again if I can use what I've already got? We'll pull right there. This leg should come out to here. Okay. Didn't feel like it was right, but I just, in a very quick measurement, it looked like it is. Up near the foot. Down on this leg. A little bit down on the knee. Looks like I could cut in a little bit there. Maybe. I'm looking at this shape. Is this shape the shape that I want compared to what I see? That will give me the appropriate gesture in this figure. If I get that shape pretty accurate. This leg comes in and then goes right down, almost parallel to this dark, the bottom of the pants. We'll get the boots in a little bit. So that begins to feel, as I just kind of step back for a second, his legs actually feel long right now, in my opinion, but it might just be that I haven't stepped back enough. As we move into his vest, I'm going to take that same color and I'm going to bring a warm to it in the shadow. So I brought a little bit of burnt sienna into that color, warmed it up, or I could take just pure asphaltum. And why? Because we're dealing with a different local color. We're not dealing with blue or denim. We're dealing with a warm vest, more of a sienna, ochre type of a vest. So therefore, the local shadow color is going to be a little warmer. It's not going to be as cold as the shadow in the blue shirt or in the denim pants. So get it in here. Now I can see it. There's a little additional warmth that occurs as it comes down towards his hand, and I'm not sure why, but I do see it. So I'm just added more burnt sienna to it. You may see that difference or you may not, because it's pretty subtle. Down around the hand, a little darker down there. Okay, now we're going to try and paint the light in that on the vest. So we'll get him all laid in, and what I call in some of my classes a two-value statement, meaning the light and the shadow are basically is what's carrying it. No modeling. So there's not a lot of color, subtle variation. It's just basic light, basic shadow. If it works, then you're ready to build beyond that. If it doesn't work, get that right. So right now, first thing I'm going to do is his vest, which I'm going to take probably yellow ochre, a little bit of the, I'm going to test it first. Not far. I took a little bit of the cad red light, or cad orange hue, whatever you want to refer to it as, and we're going to put light, and then as it goes down, up high it's lighter, but as it moves down it gets darker, because the light is, again, the light's coming from above, which means it's going to be brighter here than it is here. As it goes down and begins to turn away from the light, it gets a little darker. The same thing on the other side. Okay. It's going to go lighter. Boy, I can really see it get lighter too as it goes up. But as it stays down in this area, it stays pretty true right here. This sneaks up right up there, and then we get a little bit of light here on this part of the vest, and it sneaks up here, and all of a sudden we're starting to see the vest. Gets quite, I'm going to add a little bit of alizarin right in this area, and then over here, up. So now we're going to hit the top part of that vest. Oh, I see wait, I mixed a little bit more brown into it because it's not as bright, but let's get this part of it. I think it's important that it reads. There. There.
Laurel was saying it seems like there's a lot of light surrounding the figure. I know photos go very dark, so you're adjusting for that?
I'm sorry, I missed that question. What was that?
That there's a lot of light around the figure?
Yeah, there is. It's because, as I said before, the light is coming directly above. So therefore, it's just really baking that ground plane. He is leaning a little bit forward, so there's a lot of shadow on him. It actually works for us. It actually works for the image. So as I just use a little bit more Naples yellow into the color as it moves up. And I don't mind it getting lost into that background. So there we've got light and shadow on him basically, but we don't have it on his hands. Now that one hand on the on his hip is in deep shadow, so it's going to be very similar to the face color that I painted, which is right about in here. Yeah, it is. A little on the warm side. Maybe I could add a little bit more warmth to it. I want it to read as a hand, so we're going to just kind of block that in, bring it down onto the vest, and it fades into shadow. So the hand is there. Now the other hand has a lot of light on it. So I'm going to take one of my smaller brushes, if I can. Let's take, I'm just going to try, let's try this one. And first thing I'm going to do is clean up the background, clean up this side of the hand. And I've got that shirt color, so if I need to, go back and hit that part of the shirt. Now I do need to get the light up in there. I messed up on that, so let's get it in there right now while I've got a light on the brush. Okay, so we've pretty much conveyed that. Now let's get the light on the hand, but before we get real light, let's put the warmth in it. For that, I've got ochre. I've got through a little bit of a warm. Geez, I can actually get darker too. I just noticed. So I'm going to use my little fingernail because I want to be accurate at this point. There, I want this shadow in warmer. Tip of that finger in about there because I was off. The underside of the web of that thumb right here. It's pretty dark because this shadow right here continues over right there, right under that finger. And then even the tip of the thumb right at this point has a little bit of a shadow. So if you get the shadows in right, it almost starts begging for you to finish it off with lights. And I don't have time to sit there and model too much on the hand, so I'm going to start with a pretty light color with a little bit of warmth into it. So I have Naples yellow, little ochre, and little cat orange. I want to make sure it's not that color, which it's not, so I'm okay. So we're going to start with this color. Now, extremities, things such as fingers and toes and nose and ears, I refer to those as extremities. They tend to have more warmth. So you can actually exaggerate that, even if you don't see it. So I took a lot of the cat red light, or cat orange, whichever it is, right there. And I'm going to put it towards the tip of that, up here on this finger. Towards the tips of the fingers, I'm going to get a lot more warmth underneath the basic flesh tone I'm going to paint in there. All right? So now we're going to go light. Now I'm going to take Naples yellow, a little bit of white, kind of mixed it back in alongside of that color, and this is going to be pretty light because sun is just baking down on this hand. So it's pretty much coming down like that, coming right down on top of it. And again, I'm using my little finger as kind of a fulcrum here, so I can get that going up, overlapping the shadow, coming down on the finger. Coming down on that finger. See if I can get that little finger in now. I have it too long, but I can live with that for a while. I can always shorten it. A little bit of light on the webbing. Back here. On the thumb. So you can see that thumb is starting to work. I don't like it, but right now I'm going to leave it.
Don't you like?
It isn't quite what it isn't quite. The drawing doesn't feel quite right. I think a lot of times adding the warmth where the knuckles are helps too. And you almost can't see it here, but it's probably going to be right about in there, and right in there,
Camera keeps moving.
and right in there. That helped a little bit. I'm going to move up towards face, go into where his nose is, with that same kind of beautiful red color. And we're going to start quite warm on his nose. Again, an extremity. So that feels like sunlight coming down on the nose a little bit more. Now we're going to get the beard in. And then we're going to put a little bit of, I see a little light sneaking in on his forehead. So I've actually taken a little bit of the, actually I'm going to do this right now, come to think of it. I'm going to add a little bit of the form to his nose. So we're going to add a little light on that, right there. And not, whoop, almost had it. Right there. And then a little on his brow, which I see right about there. It's too much. So when you get that and you go too far with it, you just take your base color, cut it on down. That works pretty well. Probably have to use something like a there is a little bit better. Let's get that beard in. I'm going to stay with, let me grab one of my filberts. Now, the beard he has a whiter beard than the flesh tone. So why not right next to the flesh tone mix a cold color lighter than the flesh tone? Because that should be pretty close to the beard color. If I stay cooler and slightly lighter, which right now feels like this. Oh, by God, it worked. I remember this model's name. I don't remember his last name. His first name is Palmer. I don't recall his last name. I recall we did a Christmas party at our house, and he actually came. I invited him because he had a Santa outfit and came as Santa. It was a great Santa, and we set him up in a room in our house, and everybody was able to take their photos with Santa.
Santa's real, by the way.
Do you remember that? So we gave everybody Polaroids of themselves with Santa. Now I see variations in color because I see it get a little warmer. So what I did is I went back to the flesh tone, mixed the flesh tone into the beard color, and I see it down as it comes from his mouth, down right about in here. So we get a little variation in color. And it just helps. Also, remember that the light is coming from above. That tells me that the bottom of the beard, and I'm going to add more blue, kind of to the flesh tone. This part of the beard right here is quite a bit darker. So you want some variation. One of the things when people paint white beards, it's a couple things they do very often is they paint it all like it's hanging down, or they paint it all one color. And there are various colors in white. Now, another thing I just noticed is on the far side of his forehead, gets a little cool light coming in there. Well, almost the color of the beard. All right, now next thing we want to do, and I can see another area I just messed up on right here, the entire mustache part of the beard, which is a little bit lighter at that point, not much, but a little bit. So I add a light color right next to my hair color, and I don't like that, but still want it in shadow. It's not in light yet, because when it goes into light, you'll see as we move into light. Also, boy, I see all kinds of little things. I'm just catching them now. So sorry if I sound like I'm getting excited. Okay, so I'm using a little bit of thicker paint now, and I've added Naples to it, and we're going to start to add light to the beard. Whoa! Not that light, that fast. There we go. I just mixed a little more of that flesh tone back into it. I'm always afraid to pop things too light too fast or too dark too fast. Because I either poke a hole in it with a dark, or I make it stand out beyond the picture with a light. So I like to keep things kind of under control, color and value wise. Then as I'm approaching completion, if I decide I want to really pursue it and hit it stronger, I can do it. So we have kind of the light on the beard now, and I can see where I can get lighter, but I'm not going to do it yet. A little bit of light right on that part of the beard. Okay. Now, we're going to go down in here. Let's get the boots in. I want to be able to go back and work in here a little bit, maybe do a little bit to the background. All right, let's add some light to the pants real quick. So I'm going to take blue, white, mix it into any warm I have on my palette, but I want it more on the blue side than the warm side, and I don't want it real dark. Nope, not blue enough, but value looks pretty good. Let's try it again. Lights on the pants. They're not bright. A little more blue to it. A little warm keeps coming out, a little warmer than I want. Might even be lighter than I want. I'm not positive at this particular point. Okay? I'm just looking at where the folds are pulling from. So I keep it relatively accurate to the tension of the folds. Those are all kind of tension folds. But it actually adds a little light to his body. I like it. So I want to go back into the shirt. No, I want to get the boots, excuse me. Let's get the boots in first, then let's go back to the shirt. The boots. A lot of raw sienna and a little bit of a dirty color. But they have a lot of red in them, so I can use raw sienna. I can even bring a little cad orange or cad red light into it, and we'll paint the shape. Shape first, detail second, if I can even get to detail. If nothing else, the shape will carry it. Okay, put a little light on it. I already have a light near it mixed up, so we'll put a little light on the tip. And then if I had time, I would hit a little bit of a darker tone in, no, not enough. Let's go again. So it's light on the edge. That's a little better. It's not quite what I was after, but it basically does kind of what I was thinking. It gives a little character to that. And we can always clean up with a shadow here. There's a shadow here. There's a little bit of one on the tip. There's definitely one on the other boot. On this side, it's deep shadow down there and then up under the tip of the boot. All right. And then there's foliage we can pull back in here. Let's get the pick in very quickly, the shadow. On the handle. It's a little warmer. Probably could have pushed it a little bit more. A little on the other side too, but not quite as warm. And a little bit of a dark right there. Coming up as it goes down into the water. Right before it goes into the water, it's got a dark kind of a yolk on it right about here. So we're going to put that yolk in and then bring the shadow, as I started laying in earlier, bring that shadow up on the rock and then back behind, and it comes up again on that part of the rock. Okay? And then we've got more of the handle showing down below, right about there. A little bit of highlight on that, because it is metallic. And the pick is hidden down in the water. And so we're going to kind of indicate where it is. It's kind of in here. And a little bit of it back there. But it's being distorted a lot. And then a lot of reflective junk down in here. So there's kind of a rough idea as to where that pick sits. And that's about all we can get with the time we've got. That shadow, it's so foreign to the rest of the painting. A lot of times I like it when you get little accidental drips and stuff, but it's so foreign. I'm going to see if I can just put a cast shadow below it and maybe keep there, and maybe I can do something with this cast shadow too. Then I want to go back in the shirt. We're going to spend a little time in the shirt and then some final refinements. Because I said I was going to try and show you guys, I've got time. I was going to try and show you guys how to do some of the feeling of the patterning on the shirt. Before I do, I'm going to add a little bit more light to the beard. Told you if I felt I needed it, I was going to. Don't like this. This is a little flat in the shadow area. As it goes up to where his mouth is, I'm going to darken it. Because I do see a little bit of a darker tone right about in there. It's probably a little darker, a little bit more colorful than I wanted, but it's starting to work. So now we're going to go into that shirt and add a little bit of that pattern. First thing I'm going to look at is the darks in the pattern. And they're going to be a little bit on the blue side. And they're going to be right here. I see a little bit here. And you just indicate it. Just kind of indicate the feeling. Because it's not a clear cut. Can't quite tell. It's kind of a plaid, but it's not what we would, you cannot clearly depict all of the plaid characteristics. And then we're going to pull the lights out a little bit. Down in here, it goes down a little further. Some in here, down in here. A little bit back on this side. I see it quite a bit up in here where it goes darker. And I'm going to take the deeper shadow now, blue, and asphaltum, and I'm going to intensify it, strengthen the shadow. There. 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 So you're almost starting to get a feeling of that pattern now. Almost. It will evolve slowly. It will not, you don't put it in and draw the pattern in. You indicate the feeling of the light on the garment and a little bit of color and value change. Now, what will really pull it off if I set it up properly is when I pop lights into it. Okay. Let's go down in here. I see a little bit of variation. Oops, a little too dark. Go back to that. There we go. Because down in here, I'm really not going to see any lights. We're just going to see a feeling of there. That actually works. So now I'm going to take white. I'm going to take ultramarine and mix it down in a separate little area. A little bit more. I have it too light. And it's very, very blue, so I'm going to bring a little ochre into that color just so it isn't too blue, and I'm going to test. First area I'm going to test is right here on that shoulder. I want it a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit more, and I probably am going to need to add a little medium because I'm getting paint on paint right now. That feels better. A little light right there. Okay, that's working. Each time I'm putting it on, I'm stepping back to see if it's working. I think, you know, you do it close up and you really can't tell. You really don't know if it's popping out too much or it's not strong enough. And until you get back, honestly, it is really difficult to tell. Okay. It's a little bit clumsier than I wanted, meaning I wanted probably a little more finesse, but it's more like a wonderful study that you get the colors right in, but you really don't have quite the finesse you want. I don't know if wonderful was the right adjective. I'm using this Egbert because I can get these real wispy kind of strokes going on with it. So you can begin to see that it begins to kind of give the character. And when you build pattern, any kind of pattern into any outfit, you have to do it gradually. You cannot do it or draw the pattern in. Right here. So I get the feeling of the pattern on the shirt. It's working okay. I don't think it's working great, but it's working okay. Okay, maybe all we get in a shorter time frame. Now, there's some buttons. So I went back to the darker blue. Whoops, and I messed that up with my finger because it had paint on it. I was going to rest my finger down just so I could get a button there, and a button there, and a button down there. Okay, so now we've got a little bit of shadow information in there. I'm going to go back to the dark vest color, and I'll explain to you why. I don't like the shape of the beard here. I also want this to be a little darker up here as it fades down into his face. It's tending to work okay. I think as the beard goes back into this area, it needs to go darker. So I'm going to deepen it a little bit. And these are all the kind of adjustments that you might make if you were really going to spend a tremendous amount of time refining this to some degree of really complete finish.
Laurel wants to know, how do you get the finesse, the right swing of the brush, trial and error?
Yes. Practice.
All of the above.
It's, I wish there was actually, I keep saying I wish there was a faster way. In one respect I do, in another respect I don't wish there was a faster way to learn because it took me forever. And if all of a sudden I discovered a faster way, it would make all my struggles feel futile. So I'm glad it takes time and it takes practice and it really takes perseverance. It's a line I've heard other artists use, and I could not agree more. It takes tremendous perseverance. In other words, you have to feel, I know I can do it. I just have to keep practicing. I have to keep doing it. And that was my attitude as a student. Couldn't do it. But I figured if I kept practice long enough, I'd be able to. And working as an illustrator forced me, because I was doing finished projects and it had to look good. And boy, I had to figure out how to do it. And I had some of the skills, but not really everything I needed. So it really took some time. But I'll tell you what, I can't think of a better training ground for a young artist than I had as an illustrator. As far as being forced to paint a little bit of everything. and not just painting one thing. So I was definitely not what you would call a one-trick pony. I had to be able to paint all kinds of things, and of course then you start painting and then you say, okay, now what is it I really want to paint? Because for 25 years I've been painting everything, and my love of figures has always been there, still is. There are other things that I like, that I've grown to like, learned to like, and landscapes being one of them. It's not always my interest, and over the years it's become just a sheer pleasure to work on landscapes. And that's where I learned a lot about rocks, and I learned a lot about water, and all those things that came into play. So I'm going to put a little bit of there's a little foliage back here. It's really kind of cool. So it just, all I did is took green and the asphalt them together, and just paint the feeling of little leaf shapes. Something, and then there's all kinds of things. I mean, I could keep going on this forever. I could see all kinds. Particularly, I love getting all these little crevices and cracks and nooks and crannies into these rocks. I'm going to look up a little bit more towards his head, because I've been kind of laying off that. I didn't really put as much time as I would normally probably put into the painting of a head. And a lot of it is because a good portion of it's in shadow. And with a good portion of it being in shadow, I don't like that coming right out of his hat. So I'm going to move it over. I'm going to bring it over here.
John Deggert said that maybe the Gamblin Radiant White does appear to be whiter, possibly because the oil used in the grinding is safflower oil. So maybe that's
You may
lighter.
You may have answered the question. I don't know what it is. I like the feel of it. I like the way it mixes with other colors. That's my reasoning. So it's not as technical as what you were just saying. I still don't like that. I don't know what the hell to do with that. I think I'm going to get rid of that rock.
The rock?
Yeah, I don't like it. So let's move it. Let's get it out of there.
Just scrape it out. Oh, much better.
Huh?
Much better.
Well, Anna likes it better.
Yeah, I didn't like it coming out of his head.
I didn't like coming out of his head either. I don't like it there.
Yeah, that's better.
And let's add a little, maybe a shadow or something kind of back up in there. A little tone. That's so much better.
Yeah.
And I don't say that usually, but that rock was just, it kind of bothered me even when I was drawing it. So, and I think I might have even said so. By the way, you guys, let's put a little bit of indication into that water. I'm sorry that you guys might have missed some of the drawing and all the bad stuff I was doing with the drawing. But I hope I explained out the fact that the difference between judging your piece looking at a line drawing and judging your piece looking at so we're seeing kind of through the water, by the way, and judging your piece looking at a piece that's laid in tone, because when we see anything, we see tones. Keep that in mind. We see tones. Now, some of you might be wondering why we don't see a reflection on this guy. It's because the water is moving. If this water was really still, we'd probably see a really interesting reflection. We get a little bit of tone down in here from him, but it's really not a reflection because the water is moving. So what we end up doing is we see a lot through the water. And I'm seeing a lot of little warm colors. So I just took some burnt sienna Burnt sienna is a color I don't use a lot. I probably should. I like it. Years ago, I got hooked on burnt umber and raw sienna, and so, but every now and then I'll pick up and use some burnt sienna and go, man, I need to use that more often. It does things that other colors don't. So, and then there's some light reflections on the water. Okay, we're just at about the time, but I started a little bit late, so I'll take an extra 5 on this, and we'll put some of these reflections back in the water. That's a little, I'm going to throw some more raw sienna into that. It's just a little stronger than I want. That feels a little bit, it feels like it sits into the water better. Hope that makes sense to you. That water is starting to feel, see, the water should feel different than all the other elements that we're dealing with. And so it shouldn't have the same textural characteristics. Right here I see a lot of little pebbles. Instead of painting the pebbles, I'm just going to use my brush and get some tonal. And this is where I'd probably put a lot of time into it if we were working beyond it, is textural variations in the ground. I think I might end that shadow before it hits the rock. Yeah, that helped. So a lot of this stuff is judgment calls as you progress into your piece. You can adjust, as you saw me take a rock out. You saw me change the shadow. I'm going to fix, I don't like that shadow shape. That feels a little bit better. This edge feels pretty good. I got a couple of little divots in the rock. There's a nice little crack that happens right about there. So if I want to add things like that, the gold pan, let's at least do a little of it, okay? The shape of it works pretty good that I just kind of laid in and left. So I'm not dissatisfied. I just want to get maybe a couple more little darks. Clarify the shape maybe just a little bit more. It's a very subtle element. That helps a little bit. All these little tiny things end up helping. Now I noticed as it gets a little bit, I don't like that brush stroke. So I'm going to use my big clumsy brush instead. I don't like it was too neat. But as the water comes up near the edge of, I see a touch of darkness and a little bit of kind of interesting activity. There's a twig up there. I don't think I'd do that because it's just too active. There's too much stuff going on in that area. I think I can bring that out a little bit further. I can actually accentuate the dark edge of that, and it helps pull it out. I think I've got it a little too thick, and I think it could go up a little higher. Because if I look at where it comes right here, right to where that knee is. So what I would do is fix it. It just looked like a little bit short-handled. Isn't that a word? Something short-handled? So we're going to bring it up to here. It's got a beautiful highlight on it, so if I had the right time, I would lay this whole handle in a little bit darker. And then at the very end, much the same as happening in here, it just helps with dimension. And because it's kind of a part of the storytelling of this, I can see right up here, I could probably hit a strong. Let it dissipate. And again, a lot of times it'll pick up a little bit down here. It helps the dimensionality of that. It's a little thick right in here. That's just a matter of cutting it in with the shadow. That's not a major problem to deal with. It's just a matter of taking the shadow that would be right in here and cutting it in a little bit, cutting it in. A little reflection in that rock. See if there's anything else that's really bothering me. I really haven't taken the time to see if... It's interesting because I can begin to see in the shadow of the shirt, I'm beginning to see some of the patterning. So I see a little bit of... a little too light. I want it to stay in shadow, but what it does is it allows your shadow to have information and a little bit of detail. So you can see right there. Last thing I think I'm going to do is white into that blue with a little bit of there we go. Some of the brighter lights now. And I want this to get kind of lost into the background. I want this shirt to separate a little bit more from the rock. And that hand is really bad because it's just a stroke. I guess it doesn't matter. I've seen, great art where that sometimes a hand in shadow is almost not even there. I have this, I don't know if it's the illustrator in me or what it is that makes me want to make everything relatively readable. So I see a little bit of a dark right here on the hand and then under the knuckles. And then right where that shirt cuff is, a little bit more light there. And I'll take a brighter light. It's my bright lights now. I can push them a little bit more. So hopefully you guys, hopefully this worked out well. I just wanted to do something a little different. I know I had been doing a lot of, I think I'll probably return to some sort of interesting landscape next week. If anybody has any things that they kind of like to see, if I think I can do it. If I don't think I can do it, I'm not going to, particularly in the 90-minute time frame. But if I think I can do it, I'll be more than willing to give a lot of stuff a try. I know when I did my workshop up in Tahoe, people had mentioned they would love to see an acrylic demonstration and maybe a demonstration of some quick studies. And if I did the quick studies, I'd probably do 2, 125 and 140 minute, maybe a figure in a landscape, I don't know. But I'm willing to give anything a shot. I like challenging myself to a degree. And sometimes they work, it's pretty good, and sometimes they don't. And I think you learn probably more when they don't, and I have to work myself out of a problem. So anyway, I hope that's readable for you guys, and it works pretty well. To me, it's fine. It's not. I don't know. I can't judge my own work until I have a chance to get back from it. That's why usually what I end up doing when I leave y'all is we go down and have something to eat, and then I'll come back up later in the afternoon and see if there's anything I want to touch up in it. There's always stuff to touch up in, by the way. I shouldn't even say if there's anything. There is always stuff, but it's like I do like to keep, and I know I've mentioned this many, many times, I do like to keep the integrity of the more or less what I call plein air, because this is, alla prima. It's not an overly refined piece, so it's more of a gestural indication. And if I'm satisfied with it, which I think it's fine for the time frame I put in, and with that, I will take my glasses off, and hopefully I don't have paint on my face. And I definitely want to wish you well. happy weekend and happy holiday, and paint, paint, paint. It's fun, and you will learn a lot. Please. Thank you for watching.
There we go. Thanks, everybody.